Very excited to be joined by our guest. It's kind of a getting to know you segment. Jamie Wall is Wisconsin State Senator elect for the 30th District in Wisconsin. Good morning, Jamie. Thank you so much for joining
Good
us.
morning. I was on a similar local radio show a few days ago, and the play-in music was actually getting to know you. So,
Well, for people who do not know you, you represent the 30th District, which includes parts of Brown County, correct?
correct. It's the center. It's the heart of the Green Bay metro area. So almost all of the city of Green Bay, plus Ashwaubenon, Alloway, Bellevue, De Pere, and just a little bit of Ledgeview and Rockland to the south. But core of Green Bay metro, can't go wrong there.
And you have been involved in politics for a while. It's not like this is something that you're completely new to, from what I understand.
Sure, on and off. I ran the state's private sector economic development programs, helping businesses large and small create jobs around the state. Gosh, that's almost 20 years ago now, back in the Doyle administration. So yes, I've had some exposure to state government before.
What was it this time around that you were like, I need to run, I need to jump into this, I wanna win.
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess you got to start with the new legislative maps. I'm sure you guys and a lot of people listening are familiar with that whole dynamic. But the Green Bay area used to be the poster child for the Republican gerrymander, and that it took the metro and split it up sort of three ways out to the horizon. My new district, the one I'll represent come January, actually has. Or had at one point, I'm not sure if one of them's moved already, but 3 Republican state senators living in it who were, about 3-4 miles apart from each other. So that gives you an indication of just how crazy that situation was. But they created a district that was winnable, and I was not particularly happy about the leadership we had from the legislature in Madison over the past 10 or 15 years. And I'm sure we can get into that a little bit as we go on here. But it was the combination of those two things, and it was sort of a look to your left, look to your right kind of moment. Who's better equipped than I am to do it, and wasn't sure. We found somebody who was. So yeah, I jumped in with both feet back in March, and after a ton of work and knocking on almost 19,000 doors across the district, I won a couple weeks ago here. Yeah.
That's amazing. 19,000. I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine knocking on 19,000 doors.
I went in for my annual physical a week ago, and my blood pressure was 104/60. So it turns out that running for office can be good for your health if you do it the right way.
Blood pressure problems, run for office. Yeah, exactly. There you go. There you go.
Well, Jamie, first of all, congratulations.
Yes,
thank you so much. And thank you for being here today. We've had a lot of incumbents and people running for office. And one of the things we always ask is, you mentioned it too, the door knocking, going out there and talking to the people, getting to know what is concerning them. And, a lot of these individuals, especially with gerrymandered maps, had representatives who didn't have to campaign to win because they weren't threatened by an opponent. So I imagine there, one, had to have been people surprised to see, like, oh, there's someone knocking on my door. You want to talk to me? And two, what was the thing, I would ask, that connected us? Whether or not you knew or they were voting for you or not, but those the connective tissue, whether it's economy, things like that. What was the thing that made us more alike than separate?
Sure. I mean, I'd say a couple things on that front, Greg. I mean, one was not so much an issue, but an attitude. And a lot of people, and Democrats, Republicans, people in between, would say something to me like, look, why can't you bozos just try to work together and get something done for us? And sometimes they wouldn't say bozos, but
I bet.
So, people have noticed the kind of, divisive my way or the highway politics that we've seen coming out of the legislature under Republican control for the past 15 years. And heck, I mean, the situation's even worse in Washington. So I think there's an expectation, and it's a reasonable one, that people try to look for common ground about how we can work together and move the ball forward and, try to work within the 30-yard lines instead of, way out in the fringes. So that's one message I heard. The other thing, and you mentioned a little bit, Greg, was economics. This is no shock if you've been paying any attention to politics in Wisconsin or across the country, but there are a lot of people out there who are feeling a little pinched by the cost of living here over the past several years. And they wanted to talk to me about how their grocery bills had gone up, and there's not a lot the state can do about that, but housing was definitely an issue. Just my house is worth not quite double what it was 5 or 7 years ago, and that's great for me since I own it and all. But if you're trying to afford that first mortgage or paying rent, and you've seen your rent go up with the cost of housing around you, that's a big deal. And then other things like childcare is a big deal for people who have small kids. Healthcare and the affordability of healthcare coverage is a big deal for almost everybody. So those were actually the issues I campaigned on. I was trying to meet people where they were, and I said we can do some things at the state level to help out with housing costs, with healthcare, with childcare. And given that we're sitting on a fairly substantial surplus, we can give some of that money back to the people who need it the most in the form of middle-class tax cuts. So those were in essence the issues I campaigned on, and I think that was a message that I heard loud and clear from people at the doors, and I think it resonated with the voters in a couple weeks ago too.
Jamie, going back to the housing issue, how concerned are you about? Because I keep seeing more stories about hedge funds buying up housing stock and hedge funds buying up more rental properties, and they don't have vested interest in these communities. And if it's obviously it's for profit. It has to be for profit,
sure.
But still, it just seems so predatory and so dangerous to me.
Right. Well, look, I believe in capitalism, but I can understand why people have some concerns there. The people who run those funds are not particularly sentimental folks, and they're not particularly sentimental about my community or others. I haven't seen a lot of that issue arise locally. It may be in other parts of the state or across the country. One thing that I've tried to focus on when it comes to housing is just building more. I think we've been behind the 8 ball. Here in the Green Bay area, definitely in other parts of the states, it's even worse, in other parts of the country. But we just haven't been building enough housing to keep up with demand, and that means single-family apartments, condos, townhouses, whatever you name it. Some of the things I'm excited about is working on things like moving the coal piles in Green Bay up to the port at the mouth of the river. That'd create about 40 acres of developable land that can be developed right in the Fox River. Be great for the community in all sorts of ways if we can do that. So that's just one example, and there's probably other things, looking at zoning and working with local officials to make sure that they have the resources to encourage housing development in their communities here and across the state. So that was my primary focus when it came to housing.
If you're just joining us, Wisconsin Senator-elect Jamie Wall is our guest. He is representing Wisconsin's 30th Senate District, just recently elected to the Wisconsin State Senate. Going back to the gerrymandered maps, Jamie, and you said that there were 3 Republicans who, before the maps were changed to be fairer, who were living in the same district. I just can't imagine the level of smug, because you can live in this community for so long, and yet you do not have to respond to your constituents. You do not have to accomplish anything for your constituents, and yet you still see them once a week. You see them when you're walking down the street. I don't know. They must have a certain kind of armor or something.
Sure. Well, look, I think politics works best in any democracy if you have people who are incented to look after the people in the middle, the average working person. And if you have these bomb-proof districts, you're really not accountable to many people. Maybe you're afraid of a primary and you keep looking over your shoulder and you need to make sure that you towed the ideological line, but
No, Jamie, you just froze there for a second.
But it's a good look.
It is a good look.
A good smile.
If you have to freeze, and there you are, you're back.
Oh, sorry, it stuttered for a second there. Yeah,
that's okay.
You were saying?
Oh, I'm trying to remember what I was saying. But my hope is that with the seats that we picked up in the Senate, we were 5 for 5 among Senate Democrats in competitive races, and 4 of those were new seats. We bumped off 2 incumbents and picked up 2 open seats. So we're not in a majority, but we're within striking distance of a majority in a couple years. My hope is that with the closer margins now in the Senate, we'll see the Republicans kind of forced to behave like normal politicians, where we should talk about what works for the average Wisconsinite, and maybe compromise and cooperation aren't dirty words. And maybe we can get past at least a little bit this my way or the highway situation. But we're in this world because of a lot of hard work from me and the rest of people in the caucus, knocking on the doors and raising the money to make that happen. And also because we ran on issues that were important to the average voter. I mean, I was talking to people about just bread and butter, kitchen table economic issues, and not some of the silliness we saw at the national level. These kind of issues that are attempting to divide us instead of bring us together.
I mean, that's what I was going to ask and talk about, is that regardless of who has the majority, there is now an incentive maybe to work together. And I think, and as you said before, to quote one of the people you spoke with, I wish the bozos would get it done. It might be more advantageous to those Republicans, and maybe they did want to work together and they were afraid of, I don't know. That's all speculation. But like we saw in this past, in 2023, they didn't work a lot in 2024. There was his 10-month break they're still on, but we saw and heard about a lot of bipartisan work that had happened between the two groups.
Yes.
And we tried to highlight it every single time to show, yes, you can work together. Yes, you can get things done, and let the people know that, yes, your legislators do get into a room together and create change for this state. And I'm hoping that's even more so in 2025 now, because it's, would I like to see a Democratic majority? I wouldn't mind seeing that at all. But
of course.
I would much rather see working together and getting things done, especially when it comes to things like releasing monies for various programs, utilizing that surplus correctly, or at least entertaining great ideas for it, rather than just saying everyone gets a check.
No, fair enough. I mean, just look, Greg, I barely know the people in my own caucus yet, much less the Republicans in the state Senate.
Sure.
I have been reaching out. I have a list of people I want to talk to, and it grows by the day, but I'm, checking some of them off as I go along here too. And, I have called, or I'm going to call, all of the Republicans whose districts border mine. And so far, no one has said, I don't want to talk to you. They're like, sure, let's grab coffee next week, or, have lunch and see what we can do for the community. Because, I mean, the truth is that, look, there's just some local issues, I mentioned moving the coal piles, creating a new housing development in the river of Green Bay. That's something people ought to be able to work together and agree on across party lines. Just real meat and potatoes things. I sat down with the mayor of De Pere a couple days ago, and they're talking about, well, the state needs to develop West Main Street in De Pere in a few years, and we want to do it right because we might not get a crack at it again for 50 years. So sure. Can we redo the railroad bridge so we have a consistent 4 lanes instead of a pinch point down to 3 when you cross that bridge, and that backs up people in rush hour? And I remember seeing that happen when I was a kid, and that's a few decades ago at this point. Yeah. So just things like that. I think we can do the people's work, and we can do the people's work better if we work together across the aisle. So
we are going to continue our conversation with Jamie Wall. He is Wisconsin Senator-elect for the 30th District. Cindy, I see you on the line. If you can hang on, we will be right back. You're listening to Matenaer On Air, coming to you across the Civic Media Radio Network. Good morning. Welcome back to Matenaer On Air. Jane Matenaer, Greg Bach, and Caliente on the board, coming to you from our studio at Radio Park here in Racine. You can always join us. You can call, you can text. The number is the same, 855-752-4842. Leave a comment if you're watching on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and the platform that used to be Twitter. An hour from now, we will wrap up the show as we always do with This Shouldn't Be a Thing. Today, it is the Creepy Crawly edition. And if you ever have a thing that should not be, send it into Greg and me at janesays@civicmedia.us. JANESAYS, Jane Says @civicmedia.us. Delighted to be joined by our guest. He is Wisconsin Senator-elect Jamie Wall for the 30th District, newly elected after the fairer maps. And Jamie, I wanted to talk a little bit about, you had mentioned knocking on the doors and hearing people and how fed up they were with nothing seemingly getting done in Congress. So, because Greg and I talk about this all the time, and we live in politics, and this is the pool in which we swim. But I think Wisconsinites over the last couple of years really became acutely aware of the whole gavel in, gavel out, let's not do anything. And I
Sure.
think that hurt, and I think that hurt the Republicans.
I mean, I would agree. I mean, I would always say to people, look, I mean, you can't take the politics out of politics, but maybe not everything needs to be a knife fight all the time. I mean, there's some of these issues where you could put four reasonable people around a table for an afternoon and they could, come up with something that would, make most people happy. Not 100%. That might be too much to ask. And I don't know. And I think, most people aren't political creatures. I mean, they just want things to more or less work around them. Are
Right.
their streets paved? Are they safe? Are their public schools decent? I mean, those are all issues that came up, and obviously all the cost of living things that I talked about earlier. I mean, I think we haven't touched on really the schools much here yet. And 3 out of the 4 school districts in my state Senate district, went to referendum here, a couple weeks ago, and all of those measures passed by almost 2/3, somewhere right around there in the mid 60s. And that tells you people support their schools. But, I believe the state has been holding up its side of the bargain, and that the end result of all of these referendums across the state is that we're transferring more and more of the cost of education onto the local property tax holders. And look,
Yes.
nobody likes a tax. I get that. But if there's one tax people especially don't like, it's the property taxes. So, I mean, my hope is coming into this next session, we'll be able to work together and find a way to fund our public schools better, and at the same time, buy down some of that pressure on the local property tax rolls. And I think that's a win for everybody involved, for the kids and for the property taxpayers here as well.
Well, and I just don't understand how the state can mandate programs and then not release the fundings for the programs which have been mandated. That
Oh,
just
sure.
doesn't make any sense.
If you talk to any public school administrator, the first words out of their mouth are special education reimbursement. And it's a little esoteric, but it's a big sucking hole in their budget all the time. And again, the state with its broader and fairer taxing capacity ought to be helping out those districts and not forcing them to rely on the local property taxpayer as much as they are now. So, yeah.
I think people now, though, Jamie, are acutely aware of what kind of cost teachers take out of their own pocket. So when they say reimbursements, they'll be like, yeah, because the schools should be paying for the school supplies, not the teachers. And we have the money to do it. Therefore, we should be paying for the programs. And like you and Jane said, it's mind boggling to me that we would say, yep, we have a program. It's gone through. It's passed. It's going to cost X amount of money. We're not giving you the money right now. We'll see.
But make it happen. But make it happen. Cindy from Appleton has been very, very patient hanging on the line. Good morning, Cindy. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your patience. What did you want to say?
Well, first of all, I want to say congratulations to Jamie.
Thank you.
This is the first I've heard that you won, so I'm thrilled. And I would just like to say that he is going to be the type of candidate, a politician that represents all of us. So he's going to do great things for us. And again, congratulations.
Appreciate that.
Was that it, Cindy?
Yep. That's
Oh,
it.
wow.
All
Oh,
right,
wow.
well,
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
she-
I did, for the record, I didn't even put her up to that. So,
Now, Jamie, if all of your constituent calls can be like this every day, Jamie,
exactly.
you're doing a great job.
This is going to be a breeze,
Congratulations.
let me tell you. Right.
No notes. Keep doing you, buddy.
But going back to the schools, Jamie, I think it's
Yeah.
important. As you pointed out, the vast majority of these many, many referendums across the state all passed, which just tells us that people do love their public schools.
Right.
Not everyone wants to go to a private school.
Oh, public schools, look, they bring us together. I'm whatever success I've had in my life is because, my parents worked hard and the taxpayers back in the 80s invested in a good public education system for me. K-12, I was the first in my family to go to college, down at UW-Madison, and I'll date myself, but I paid $800 a semester when I started there for the first
Wow.
time, for one of the top 50 universities in the world. So, but obviously this stuff pays dividends. I mean, obviously all this, the education that the taxpayers of Wisconsin provided for me changed my life and made me a more productive, adult. And I've made some money over the course of the last few decades and paid my taxes and tried to, feed that system. And I think we owe the same thing to the kids today that I had. But Greg, I think you're right that people do support their public schools. And if you look at what we did in the state Senate a couple Tuesdays ago, in focusing on these kind of issues on schools, on cost of living, I ran ahead of Harris, Baldwin, and Biden, and so did many of my colleagues. And I think that puts us in a good position looking forward in 2 years and in the future.
Jamie Wall, thank you so very much. Wisconsin Senator-elect for the 30th District. We will stay in touch. Can't wait to have you back